I now give the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, thank you, Madam President, for your valuable effort to promptly convening this emergency meeting in your capacity as the President of the Security Council. We welcome the presence of Secretary General at this meeting, and we also listen to the statement made by the ASG, Mr. Jenka. We appreciate all those members who have chosen to stand on the right side of history and thus strongly condemned the act of aggression of the United States and the Israeli regime against my country. Madam President, I address this Council today for the third time since the brutal aggression against my country, first by the Israeli regime on June 13th and now by the United States. I speak with utmost urgency and grave concern on behalf of our people, a peace-loving nation of nearly 100 million people. Today, another stain was recorded in the political history of the United States. After the illegitimate Israeli regime failed to do the worst dirty work, Trump was forced in the early hours of Sunday, June 22, to personally carry out the most sordid part of this vile agenda. Once again, the internationally wanted war criminal Netanyahu succeeded in hijacking U.S. foreign policy, dragging the United States into yet another costly, baseless war. America has once more recklessly chosen to sacrifice its own security merely to safeguard Netanyahu. Once again, the world has witnessed the blatant corruption of the U.S. political system and its leaders. As an independent, peace-seeking nation, the Islamic Republic of Iran had repeatedly warned the warmongering U.S. regime to refrain from stumbling into this quagmire. Even though Iran reserves its full and legitimate right under international law to defend itself against this blatant U.S. aggression and its Israeli proxy, the timing, nature, and scale of Iran's proportionate response will be decided by its armed forces. Throughout history, the resilient and united Iranian nation has withstood deeper wounded and faced more vicious enemies, and this time too. It will show its dignity, strength, and greatness to the world. Over the past 10 days, the Israeli barbaric assault, the international bodies, including the UN Security Council and the International Atomic Energy Agency, have been provided with all the necessary information and warning. Yet, they have proven once again that the so-called 8 decades-long quest to prevent war and aggression is hollow and powerless in practice. Madam President, history will not forget these tragic days. It is profoundly heartbreaking that a peace-loving country, one of the founders of the United Nations with over 5,000 years of culture and civilization, responsible party to the UN Charter and the NPT, and non-nuclear weapon state, has been under armed attack by an illegitimate regime, no by its chief backer, the United States, but poses thousands of nuclear warheads. The United States, a permanent member of this council, the depositary of the NPT, and the only state that has ever used nuclear weapons, murdering millions in 2 cities, has now once again resorted to illegal force, waged a war against my country under a fabricated and absurd pretext, preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. What a bitter and tragic irony. Madam President, this US and Israeli regime aggression is a clear and flagrant breach of international law. It breaches the preliminary norms of prohibition of aggression and the very fundamental principles enshrined in the UN Charter, namely Article 2.4, which categorically prohibits the threat or use of force against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of any member state. This illegal act also violates the Charter, a statute of the IAEA, relevant resolution of the Agency General Conference, Security Council Resolution 487 and 2231, as well as the NPT itself. Colleagues, while the representative of the United States continues to make baseless accusations against Iran, the international community is well aware of the well-documented and dark record of military intervention, illegal use of force against other sovereign states, and sponsorship of terrorism by the United States in the Middle East and across the world. The facts speak for themselves. All U.S. allegations against Iran are unfounded, with no legal basis, and politically motivated. One clear example is the horrific and cowardly assassination of martyr Major General Qasem Soleimani and his companions. He was cowardly and deliberately assassinated while visiting Iraq at the formal request of the Iraqi government. This crime, carried out by the United States forces on direct order of the then President of the United States, who yesterday again claims the responsibility for such a heinous crime. Major General Soleimani remains a hero for our people and the nation in the region for countering terrorist groups, in particular Daesh. Madam President, from its illegal invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan to its catastrophic intervention to Libya, the United States had ignored the UN Charter, shattered entire societies, and destabilized the region for decades. The people of these countries continue to pay the price for these reckless policies. Madam President, Israeli attack on June 13 and the U.S. aerial strike on June 21 did not occur in vacuum. They are a direct result of the illegal and politically motivated actions of the United States and its European partners, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, as well as biased conduct of the IAEA Director General. Undoubtedly, the United States, the UK, and France, three permanent members of this Council, along with the Israeli regime and the IAEA General Director, will bear full responsibility for the death of innocent civilians in Iran, especially women and children, and for destruction of vital civilian infrastructure. Madam President, Iran was preparing for the next round of diplomatic engagement with the United States on June 15, only for Israel to strike Iran 2 days before those talks could take place. In fact, Israel decided to destroy diplomacy. The so-called offer of diplomacy was nothing more than a deceitful policy to mislead the international community. This week, as our foreign minister held talks with the E3 European Troika and the European Union, the United States decided to destroy the diplomacy. What conclusion can be drawn from this situation? From the perspective of Western countries, Iran must return to the negotiation table. But as Iran's foreign minister mentioned, how can Iran return to something it never left, let alone? Madam President, the pattern is evident. The NPT, a cornerstone of non-proliferation regime, has been manipulated into a political weapon. Instead of granting parties legitimate right to peaceful nuclear energy, it has been exploited as a pretext for aggression and unlawful action that jeopardize the supreme interest of my country. The selective double standards behavior of IAEA board and the Security Council turning a blind eye to Israeli past attack on Iraq's Osirak reactor. Its assaults on Iran nuclear sites under IAEA safeguards and its ongoing aggression is a moral, political, and legal disgrace. This shame will forever tarnish the credibility of these international bodies. With such blatant bias, there is no assurance that the other NPT member will not face similar aggression. Madam President, for more than 2 decades, Israel, an outlaw nuclear-armed regime that refused to join the NPT despite Security Council Resolution 487, has promoted the deceitful and false narrative that Iran is on the cusp of acquiring a nuclear weapon, while there has not been even one shred of evidence to substantiate such baseless allegation. Iran's consistent diplomatic engagement made in good faith, leading to the JCPOA and its full compliance with the commitment therein with the UN Security Council Resolution 2231, demonstrate the very peaceful nature of its nuclear program. Madam President, Iran is acting within its inherent unlawful right of self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. We will take all measures deemed necessary at our disposal to protect our people, our sovereignty, territorial integrity, national and vital interest, and our peaceful nuclear program in accordance with international law. Once again, I would like to remind this esteemed body of its legal and moral obligation. If this Council and the United Nations built to maintain international peace and security fail to act at this decisive moment, they will forever lose their credibility and relevance. Israel and the United States are the chief culprits for eroding the rule of law, undermining international law, the IAEA statute, and the non-proliferation regime. However, the silence, double standards, and complicity of international organizations and some Western countries, including France and the UK, are equally reprehensible. The UN Security Council should immediately act under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter to redress such injustice and gross violation by strongly condemning the blatant aggression, violation, and heinous crimes committed against the Islamic Republic of Iran, adopting effective enforcement action against the aggressor, hold the United States and Israeli regime fully accountable, place the Israeli nuclear facilities under agency safeguard. This is a historic test for this Council, for the United Nations as a whole. Every state and every responsible actor must rise to this occasion and condemn without ambiguity. These blatant crimes, failure to do so will lead to the gradual decline of the very aspiration of the non-proliferation regime and normalize a dangerous precedent when might our rights, right, and where the fundamental principles of the UN Charter are trampled without consequences. Madam President, distinguished colleagues, we stand at the crossroads. Let us be the moment we put an end to impunity, the moment we uphold the principles on which this Council was founded. This Council must act decisively. Silence will be complicity in these crimes. If this Council fails to act and condemn this blatant aggression, the stain of complicity will forever remain on its conscience as it does with Gaza. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I would like to thank the Secretary General, ASG Yancha, Director General Grossi, for your remarks. Madam President, last night, history changed. The United States of America struck Iran's nuclear sites at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. The United States, the leader of the free world, removed the greatest existential threat facing the free world. Just like our Operation Rising Lion, this was not a war of choice. This action was a necessity. It was a righteous act for the United States, for Israel, for the Middle East, and for the world. So the entire world should say on record today, here and now, thank you. Thank you to the United States for removing the greatest threat to global security. Thank you, President Trump, for acting when so many hesitated. Thank you for protecting the free world with strength and with moral clarity. Now, some come here to denounce the United States and Israel. So let me ask you, where were you? Where were you when Iran raced toward the bomb? Where were you when it enriched uranium far beyond the point of civilian usage? When it buried entire fortress beneath mountain to prepare for our extermination? Where were you when Iran turned negotiation into theater and deceit into strategy? You were silent. You were complicit. You were afraid. You were bystanders. Months ago, I sat before this council and called for a coalition of the courageous. I called for a coalition with the moral clarity and strength to confront the greatest threat our world has seen since the Second World War. Last night, the leader of the free world acted with that courage. The United States acted, not just for itself, but for every nation that values freedom over radicalism. For every nation whose children deserve to grow up without the shadow of a nuclear disaster hanging over their heads. Now, the world must follow suit. Madam President, we have heard many calls for diplomacy today in this chamber. We have heard the Secretary General calls for de-escalation. You cannot ignore that diplomacy was tried over and over. The United States led that effort. Many nations here in this room engaged in diplomacy with determination and good faith. But the regime in Tehran had other plans. It used the negotiating table as camouflage, a delay tactic, a way to buy time while building missiles and enriching uranium. Iran negotiated agreements it never intended to keep. It made commitments it never honored. It answered deadlines with defiance and met oversight with obstruction. The free world gave it every chance. We gave it months, we gave it years, we gave it every possible off-ramp. Iran would not move. So it had to be moved. The regime goal was never peaceful energy. Its goal was death and destruction. Its nuclear program was not a diplomatic puzzle. It was a loaded gun pointed at the heart of the international system and the stability of the world. To those who now fake concern and cry escalation, we say, this is what the last line of defense looks like, when every other line has failed. Make no mistake, the cost of inaction would have been catastrophic. A nuclear Iran would have been a death sentence just as much for you as it would have been for us. Madam President, while Iran fired rockets at synagogues, mosques, schools, and homes, the United States acted with precision, as does Israel. Israel's targets are not cities. They were not civilians. They were not homes or schools. They are ballistic missile launchers and nuclear sites. This is a moral difference between us and them. They seek chaos, we seek order. They build weapons to destroy the world, we build partnerships to protect it. As you all know, we have already gained air superiority across Iranian skies. We have acted with purpose. We have acted with restraint. And we will act with the moral clarity that has always defined our people. Iran's reach extends far beyond our borders. It arms militias in Iraq. It commands terror in Lebanon. It funds Houthis in Yemen. It plots murder in Europe. and it threatens every capital in the West with its growing arsenal of ballistic missiles. You cannot sit this one out. You cannot condemn the firefighters while the arsonist tries to light more fires. You cannot protect peace by appeasing evil. Colleagues, Israel did not seek this moment, but when that moment came, we did not flinch. We know what happens when the world turns a blind eye to threats too terrible to imagine. This time, we acted, and this time, we were not alone. Let the record show, when the world stood at the edge of a nuclear disaster, America stepped forward. When time ran out, America showed courage. And when the moment came to confront the forces of extinction, America led. Now it is time for the rest of the world to guarantee that the threat of a nuclear Iran never returns. Thank you, Madam President.